Imagine waking up one morning in one of the poorest countries on Earth, where opportunity is scarce and hope feels fragile. Then geologists announce something that stops the world. 11 billion barrels of proven recoverable oil lie beneath your coastal waters. Overnight, Guyana went from obscurity to the center of a global scramble. Investors and oil executives suddenly see a treasure trove, while 800,000 citizens suddenly face a historic turning point. This isn't just a story about energy, it's a story about power, potential, and what happens when the world discovers resources in a country few could even locate on a map. Within months of the discovery, the planet's largest oil corporations descended on Guyana. ExxonMobil, Hess, and CNO arrived with contracts promising partnership and prosperity, but the numbers were shocking. A 2% royalty rate for Guyana. To put it in perspective, Norway negotiates 78%, the UK around 40%, and even other developing nations secure 12–20%. Yet Guyana, the country that actually owns the oil, was offered crumbs. The contract also pushed financial risk onto Guyana, covering price drops, environmental cleanup, and tax exemptions. What looked like a lifeline was, in reality, a blueprint for extraction disguised as development. This isn't new. History shows the same pattern repeated across the global south. Shell in Nigeria has operated for decades while local communities remain impoverished. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, mineral wealth brought misery rather than prosperity. Irfaan Ali saw these patterns clearly. To him, the Exxon deal wasn't an opportunity, it was a modern incarnation of colonial exploitation, wearing a business suit. Powerful nations historically have designed systems where wealth flows outward, while local populations remain marginalized, and these contracts often serve as the legal framework to continue that flow. Irfaan Ali wasn't born into privilege. He wasn't groomed in Western universities to serve corporate interests. He's an economist who understands numbers, history, and human impact. When Ali rose to the presidency, he brought with him not ideology but clarity. He could read the contracts, see the patterns, and recognize the stakes. His leadership isn't about charisma, it's about calculation, moral courage, and a vision for Guyana that refuses to bow to predatory terms. In a world where small nations are expected to comply, Ali stepped forward ready to rewrite the rules. February 2025, World Economic Forum, Davos. Surrounded by the world's most powerful oil executives and politicians, Ali didn't mince words. He called them out, publicly and without apology. You cannot lecture us about carbon footprints while your corporations have polluted our planet for over a century. You cannot demand we remain poor to satisfy your climate conscience while enjoying decades of fossil fuel prosperity. 2% of our resources is not partnership, it is theft with paperwork. Cameras captured the room's tension. Oil executives shifted uncomfortably, some looked down, some whispered. The room was silent. Ali's confrontation wasn't just rhetorical, it had teeth. By leveraging alternative partners, he gave Guyana genuine negotiating power. China, India, and Brazil stepped in, not to replace Western companies, but to create competitive options. Suddenly, ExxonMobil had to return to the table. Guyana's terms weren't just adjusted, they were rebalanced. Royalties improved, local content requirements strengthened, and environmental protections enforced. The Natural Resource Fund was established to ensure transparency, preventing a repeat of past resource extraction mistakes. Guyana went from passive participant to active controller of its destiny, reshaping contracts that were designed to exploit. As Ali gained leverage, Western media began a predictable play. Suddenly, his leadership was questioned. Headlines warned of authoritarianism, populism, and the dangers of resource nationalism. Credit rating agencies downgraded the country despite its rapid growth. International financial institutions issued statements on fiscal sustainability. The narrative subtly shifted. Ali was no longer a democratically elected leader defending his nation. He was framed as a destabilizing force. The disconnect was striking. Guyana's elections were free and fair, yet challenging Western interests made the country's prosperity a story of potential threat, not success. Ali's brilliance lay in creating alternatives. By building strategic partnerships with China, India, and Brazil, Guyana was no longer at the mercy of Western oil giants. These relationships weren't exclusive, they were leverage. Suddenly, negotiations were about fair terms, not survival. Guyana could demand proper royalties, local employment, and environmental protections without fearing retaliation. For the first time, a small nation with a fraction of the world's population demonstrated that global energy contracts could be approached as a negotiation, not a surrender. Before we dive deeper, consider this. How often do we hear about small nations standing up to billion-dollar corporations? The story of Guyana isn't a sidebar, it's a blueprint for the global South. Pause and ask yourself, what if other countries adopted the same approach? Could the balance of global energy power shift? Ali has created a living experiment in resource sovereignty, and the world is watching. This isn't theory, it's happening right now, and the stakes are enormous for both investors and citizens alike. By 2024, Guyana's GDP growth rate exceeded 26%, the fastest in the world. Infrastructure projects sprang up, healthcare access expanded, and educational opportunities multiplied. These gains didn't come from rejecting foreign investment, they came from demanding fair terms. The Natural Resource Fund ensured transparency, with every deposit publicly recorded and withdrawals approved by Parliament. Wealth that might have enriched a small elite instead began to flow into everyday lives. Guyana's economy became a case study in how strategic contracts and disciplined governance can turn resource wealth into societal benefit rather than corruption. For decades, the story told about resource-rich developing nations has been controlled by Western institutions. You lack expertise, oversight is required, and foreign corporations must lead. Ali is dismantling that narrative, showing results instead of ideology. By proving that transparent, fair agreements are possible, he's challenging the assumption that exploitation is the only viable path. Observers in Africa, Asia, and Latin America are taking note. Guyana isn't just growing, it's rewriting the rules of engagement for every nation with untapped natural resources. Ali's strategy began to ripple outward. In September 2025, Senegal cited Guyana while renegotiating agreements with foreign oil companies. Ghanaian opposition parties referenced the Guyana framework in campaign debates. Mozambique demanded higher local ownership percentages, explicitly pointing to the precedent Guyana set. The small nation with 800,000 citizens became a template for resource sovereignty, proving that even countries historically marginalized in global markets can establish leverage if they act strategically. Standing up to billion-dollar corporations and Western powers comes at a human price. Ali described receiving death threats, not just against himself but his family. His 9-year-old daughter asked why people hate them for wanting good schools and hospitals. Every day, he faces a stark choice: safety for his family or defending his people's future. These pressures rarely appear in economic or political analysis, yet they illustrate the personal stakes behind policy decisions, showing that leadership isn't abstract, it's deeply human. Western criticism of Guyana's oil development often centers on climate responsibility. Yet Ali highlights the double standard. The United States has burned fossil fuels for over 150 years. Britain industrialized on coal emissions. Europe prospered while the global South remained constrained. Meanwhile, Guyana, a carbon-negative nation, is developing a fraction of emissions but investing heavily in rainforest protection. The argument isn't about emissions, it's about control. The world's most powerful nations lecture the small, developing country while ignoring decades of their own environmental impacts. Ali went further, presenting documented evidence of corporate environmental devastation. Shell's operations in the Niger Delta since 1958 caused thousands of oil spills. BP's Deepwater Horizon disaster released 210 million gallons of oil in 2010, yet penalties were a fraction of profits. ExxonMobil predicted climate change in the 1970s and buried the research while funding denial campaigns. By exposing these facts, Ali framed Western criticism as moral posturing. Corporations preaching responsibility while evading accountability aren't in a position to dictate terms to a small, transparent nation. In November 2025, Ali announced the Global South Energy Alliance, a coalition of resource-rich developing nations committed to sharing information, coordinating negotiations, and presenting a united front to multinational corporations. Not a cartel, not price fixing, but a strategic alignment to level the playing field. The announcement sent immediate ripples across global energy markets. Nigeria expressed formal interest within days, and other countries began exploring similar frameworks. Ali is creating infrastructure for collective bargaining power previously unseen in the Global South, reshaping energy geopolitics with cooperation instead of confrontation. Ali's moves triggered immediate reactions in global energy markets. Oil futures wavered, investor confidence in traditional Western contracts trembled, and analysts scrambled to assess the implications of a united Global South front. Countries long accustomed to passive agreements now saw precedent for negotiation and leverage. Even multinational corporations, accustomed to dictating terms, faced new pressures. The traditional hierarchy of resource exploitation was shifting, and the ripple effects could reach beyond oil into gas, minerals, and other strategic commodities. The small nation of Guyana became an unexpected catalyst for potential systemic change in global trade dynamics. Looking back, few leaders of small nations have directly confronted global power structures with both evidence and results. Ali's actions echo historical moments where principle, strategy, and courage intersected to redefine the rules. By standing firm, he's not only altered contracts but challenged centuries-old assumptions about sovereignty, fairness, and economic justice. Scholars, policymakers, and activists are beginning to study Guyana as a case study in modern resource diplomacy. The nation's story is no longer a local news item, it's a global lesson in how even the smallest voice can reverberate on the world stage. Guyana's story isn't just about oil. It's about challenging assumptions, reclaiming control, and proving that even the smallest nations can reshape global systems. Irfaan Ali's strategy has shown that courage paired with intelligence can rewrite decades of entrenched power dynamics. This isn't hypothetical. Other nations are already taking notes, recalibrating negotiations, and reconsidering the rules of international resource deals. As Guyana continues its journey, the world watches closely, and the question remains, which countries will follow the blueprint and which will resist? The era of automatic compliance may be ending, and new opportunities for equity, justice, and environmental responsibility are emerging.